insight, what the tariffs are doing to your businesses, production agriculture. I know has been the focus. And Mr. Chairman, thanks for holding this hearing. Obviously, there's a complex issue at play right now with our relationship with the rest of the world when it comes to trade policy, and we're inevitably going to have to tee up more hearings to get more feedback as far as working with all of you to find a safe landing zone for all this so that we don't mess up the economic recovery that's occurring in our country right now. But with all due respect, we haven't heard anything new today than what each of us are hearing in our districts each and every day. I come from one of the largest agriculture producing districts in the nation throughout western Wisconsin, one of the biggest dairy producing nations, and I hear from farmers every day and manufacturers and the concern that consumers are raising right now too. And so this isn't much new news that we're getting here with your testimony. It's consistent, if that brings you any comfort, but I think the President's underappreciating what the impact has been. Just the PR war he's losing terribly back home in my state in Wisconsin. Let me just read to you a few of the media headlines of late. Trump's tariffs. Wisconsin manufacturers hit by trade policy discuss plight with Senator Ron Johnson. Trump's global trade war expected to inflict economic casualties in Wisconsin and across the nation. Wisconsin construction seeing cost increases following steel and lumber tariffs. Wisconsin cheesemakers facing double whammy. Tariffs, other costs raise home building prices. Harley-Davidson, stung by tariffs, shifting some production overseas. And then an article about how Trump responded to our iconic company in Wisconsin. And on and on and on. And so you're wondering, where do we go from here? And one thing that's lacking from this panel today is an official from the Trump administration to give us clear guidance of where the landing zone is, what the objectives are, what are we asking of China at the end of the day, what are we demanding of the EU at the end of the day, because we have very little to go on right now, and that must frustrate all of you right now, that we don't know where this could possibly end in a good way. Unfortunately, from my perspective, I don't see it ending very well soon or very safely. Because we're in a tit-for-tat situation now where each side is escalating the retaliation, and the Trump administration apparently is throwing out the global rules-based trading system that we helped create since the end of the Second World War. And they become addicted to tariffs, they're addicted to protectionism, and they don't believe in trying to go out and negotiate trade agreements that could solve a lot of these problems. Mr. Boehning, I was struck, by your testimony about hopefully there's an end game in this and the fact that China's been cheating. There's unanimous agreement, bipartisan, that China hasn't been playing by the rules when it comes to IP theft, when it comes to subsidizing their own agriculture production, when it comes to forced technology transfers or the requirement of joint ventures. We all know that. But the proper course of action is to bring that to the WTO. Not to unilaterally hit China, which makes it easy for them to retaliate against us, which they are doing. And you all know, and Mr. Vandervelde, you especially were eloquent in saying they know how to do it and they know how to hurt us. And usually it's in production agriculture. In the previous administration, under President Obama, filed more WTO complaints than any other previous administration. He had a 100% win record with the WTO. The current administration has filed just a few, and a majority of them were previous Obama administration complaints. That would have been, I submit, the proper venue in order to take on China, which we have done consistently at WTO and won, rather than taking this unilateral tariff action against them today. And yet this administration is doing everything they can to undermine the effectiveness of WTO dispute resolution. They refuse to appoint judges to the appellate panel. And within a few short months, that whole organization will be shut down. They won't be able to do any business. And then it is a dog-eat-dog world out there. And that's what we have to look forward to, unless we figure out a way to do it. Path forward. Congress needs to reassert our authority. I've just introduced bipartisan legislation with Mike Gallagher that calls for the Corker bill here on the House side. We can hope that we can get some support from the outside community about Congress needing to have a greater voice in what's being done. I also introduced legislation earlier this year that calls for a Congressional Review Act so that Congress has a chance to disapprove of what the administration is doing, whether it's 232 or 301 or just the unilateral tariffs that he's applying to the rest of the world. So there are some steps forward, but it's going to require a Congress willing to assert ourselves in a more meaningful fashion in developing trade policy rather than just punting to this guy who is addicted to tariffs. because I'm afraid that's just going to end badly for all of us. And again, I thank you all for testifying and your involvement in this issue, but we've got a lot of work to do right here in the U.S. Congress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kind. Mr. Smith, you're recognized.